Minnesota ended their season at 5-7. The first time in 23 years they finished a year under 500, and also means they're going to miss a bowl game for the first time since then as well. Now, Luke Fickell and his staff turn their attention to rebuilding a roster that's surely going to be hit by transfers. In fact, several players have already announced their intention to enter the transfer portal, including starting outside linebacker Leon Lowry. Portal doesn't officially open until next Monday. Turning to the Packers, they are on the field for practice earlier today to continue getting ready for their trip to Detroit on Thursday. Green Bay has been quite good away from Lambeau Field this year, going 4-0 in true road games. But walking into Ford Field is a different kind of challenge, according to Coach Matt LaFleur.
There's nothing like to replicate the noise that you're going to experience. We work the silent count in practice. Everybody in the league does that. It's not like our first hostile environment. Chicago was pretty loud. I get it. I think this is going to be louder. It's going to be a dome stadium, and their fan base is going crazy right now, getting behind the Lions. So it's going to be a fun environment.
There was some good news on the injury front as Romeo Doubs practiced for the first time since suffering a concussion, while Jair Alexander was practicing for a second straight day. Kick on Thursdays at 7:15.
Actor portrayal.
When I first looked into life insurance, I worried about the hassle. Then I found Better Life. Their simplified issue whole life coverage plans mean no medical exam. I found a plan that fit my budget, and now my final expenses are covered. Plus, I get Better Life member benefits at no extra cost. That's definitely better.
Better Life Insurance, where better means belonging. Call 888-488-4136. Insurance issued by Better Life Insurance Company. Terms and conditions apply. Member benefits are subject to change. Contact a licensed agent for details.
Well, Wisconsin's up to number 11 in the latest AP Top 25. That's after taking care of Chicago State on Saturday. Badgers will host Michigan tomorrow night. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heil.
It's always about the locker room. It's on them to embrace it and continue to push each other to get better and better and better. And that's really all we're all about. Continue to work at it. We've got a great group.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
That's a comment from Matt LaFleur yesterday in his press conference, which I was confused about a little bit. I was getting a bunch of emails from Mike Clemens yesterday, Matt LaFleur audio and Jordan Love audio. And at first I'm like, Mike, slacking a little bit, right? Like the game's on Thursday night. I'm not getting audio until Sunday. Now, to be fair, wouldn't need it because we weren't on the air on Friday. And that's something I would do. I would wait to sit down and cut up the audio until Sunday because, well, you don't need it until Monday anyways. But that's normally not what Mike is like. Like I get audio from Mike after a game at like 3 a.m. He doesn't sleep until he gets all that audio and all the post-game coverage sent out to us. Ebo, Bill, myself. And then I realized, oh yeah, duh. The Packers play on Thursday this week, which means yesterday was technically for them, is that Tuesday or Wednesday, right? Everything's shifted back. So that comment was from Matt LaFleur, who spoke with the media yesterday about the state of the locker room and state of the team. Normally, coming back to work after a holiday weekend is the worst, especially Thanksgiving and sometimes Christmas. Depends on what day Christmas falls on. But for most folks, right, Thanksgiving means a 4-day weekend. Unless maybe you don't have to travel for Thanksgiving and you can make extra money by working on Friday, or maybe you just don't have the vacation day, or maybe you work in a job where, holidays don't really impact if you work in healthcare or something like that. But for a large portion of folks, myself included, and I do not pretend that this is an important job, right? That means a 4-day weekend. And you look forward to that 4-day weekend for forever. It's the same with Memorial Day and Labor Day. It's like those 3-day weekends at the beginning and the end of the summer. You can look forward to it and get those extra days off. And then when you have to come back to work after that long weekend, it's like, oh, well, now what? But today, at least for me coming back to work, I can't say the same for you. This job's a little unique. Coming back to work today is difficult for me because there's so much to talk about. We have 3 days between Thursday, Friday, and yesterday of NFL games to talk about. We have multiple days of awesome college football games, excluding what the Badgers did on Friday to talk about. We have so much to discuss, which makes coming back from the holiday weekend a little bit easier, at least for me. I know that doesn't apply to you, but I don't know. It's my show. I was speaking about my experiences. This is the Wisco Sports Show. My name is Grant Bills. Hope you had an awesome Thanksgiving. Lots of food, family, the football, the whole thing. I hope it was great. We're going to cover a lot of ground tonight between the Packers and the Badgers. So I want to get right into it. I will take your calls, 608-321-1670 after the first break. You can text that number as well And I get a lot of texts, and I can't get to them all. Otherwise, I'd be reading text the whole show. But I'll try to get to as many, and I'll keep my eye on it and read your texts as well. And you can comment on the live stream as well, Facebook and YouTube. The Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills, and the show streams on Twitter as well, at Wisco Grant. I know we're 4 days removed from Packers Dolphins, and we're now 3 days removed from Wisconsin, Minnesota. But I do want to focus mostly on those two games tonight. And in the case of the Packers, we can use last Thursday's game to propel us towards Detroit on Thursday. I don't just want to break. I don't want to do a Packers-Dolphins post-game show today. But of course, we're going to talk about the game. And I don't know that we're really going to talk about Wisconsin, Minnesota at all, because that game is meaningless other than the fact that the Gophers got the axe. But I think most Badger sports fans are preoccupied with bigger discussions. We got bigger fish to fry. But I do want to, the crux of it is what happened on Thursday and what happened on Friday between the Badgers and the Gophers. And we can go in chronological order. Let's start with the Packers. In hindsight, the Packers smoking the Dolphins on Thursday night was the most obvious result ever. And that's easy to say after the fact. All right, it's easier to say, I wish I would have bet more on that game if you wagered, or it's easy to say, I should have seen that. We probably should have seen Thursday night coming. And I listened to a lot of sports podcasts over the last couple of days, traveling back yesterday and then coming into work today, listening to my normal podcast, my normal shows, my stupid sports content that I can't get enough of. And everyone's like, that was the most obvious pick. That was the most obvious. And maybe on Thursday or on Wednesday, as we were kind of doing our last show, Bill and I were making our picks from 10 to 2. And then, Wednesday night, we didn't have a show Wednesday night. So I guess Wednesday on Bill's show was the last time we talked. If you listen to the 10 to 2 show, Bill was a little nervous about that game. Felt like maybe there was some trap game components on a short week. But after watching it and thinking about it, it's like, oh, that was obvious. The Dolphins looked horrible, and their head coach looked freezing cold on the sideline. I watched the game with my family because I was home. And my mom and my sister, they watch some sports. My dad watches the most of all. My brother watches a little bit, but he's not a big sports guy. But we're all watching the game together. And NBC, before the game starts, put the side-by-side shot up of Matt LaFleur on his sideline and Mike McDaniel on his sideline. And my mom goes, "That's their head coach? He looks a little dorky. He looks a little dorky no matter what he's wearing." But it's like, could you look like any more of a child? Just wear a winter jacket. Just wear a winter jacket. Why do these coaches, they're so against just wearing what is warm and comfortable in the cold? And I think so those vests or those shirts, they must have a battery in them or something. Otherwise you'd freeze to death. But it's like, Mike McDaniel could not have, he looked like the kid in school who forgot the snow pants and the jacket, but still wants to go play outside. Like, he just didn't look down for it. The Dolphins botched the punt on the first play of offense, or even before their first play of offense of the night. Like, they just weren't ready. It was the most obvious thing ever. That team can't play in the cold. And Tua in the first half looked worse than Alex Hornibrook. And it doesn't help that he's a lefty. But he's missing throws over guys' head, behind guys, down, and the timing was off, right? It wasn't the same. They weren't ready for it. And in the second half, made some throws, shades of Kirk Cousins, right? Now that the game is effectively over, I'm going to get hot. And I'm going to rack up some yards, and we're finally going to move the ball now that the game is mostly out of hand. And the Dolphins, we've seen crazy deficits overcome in the NFL. No game is ever really over, but come on. Tua and the Dolphins really waited until the game was effectively over to get going. Now, the Packers still get credit for this game, beating a team in the cold like they did. Because unlike the Detroit game, which wasn't in the cold, but that game was in the rain and the wind and bad conditions under the lights a couple weeks ago, the Packers get credit for Thursday night because unlike the Detroit game, the Packers actually handled their business. And they showed up and they executed and they played good football. Right? We talked about the conditions. I remember going into that Lions game about a month ago. We talked about the conditions all week. It's like, man, it's going to be rainy. Jared Goff in the rain. It's going to be windy. Jared Goff in the wind. Not Jared Goff weather. Not conducive to him playing quarterback at a high level. And we've seen that for years. I'm not trying to pick on Jared Goff. He's very good. But when you get him outside in the elements, he's vulnerable, right? There's a path to victory there, even for a team, the Packers, probably not as good as the Lions. And in that game, the Lions game, the Packers committed 10 penalties. They went 1 of 4 in the red zone. And Jordan Love threw probably the worst pick six you can throw, excluding the one that he threw against the Rams a couple weeks ago, right? Like, awful pick six. The Packers did all of the dumb things. And maybe Detroit would have won that game anyways. Maybe if the Packers don't commit any penalties and they score a couple times in the red zone instead of settling for field goals or getting stuffed on fourth down. Maybe Jordan Love doesn't throw that pick six, and maybe the Lions still win. They're excellent, right? Maybe they still would have won. But my point is, a month ago, the Packers didn't put any pressure on Detroit. They didn't force Detroit to really perform in the rain. They made Jared Goff make like 2 or 3 big throws. And that was it. That's all the Lions had to do to win on that Sunday in the rain in the elements. Now, the Dolphins game on Thursday night, the Packers actually forced the Dolphins to play, and they couldn't do it, right? They started fast. This is how the game started. If you look at the drive-by-drive breakdown, I think this is really important. So the Packers went 3 and out, but then they jump on the muffed punt, and then it was kind of game on. They scored a touchdown to go up 7-0. The defense holds the Dolphins to 5 plays, minus 3 yards. They get the ball back, 12 plays, 76 yards, touchdown. They hold the Dolphins to a field goal. Packers punt, Dolphins punt. Packers score a touchdown, 6 plays, 82 yards. They stop the Dolphins on downs, and then they get that field goal, executing really well going into halftime, which was a nice remedy for me after seeing what they did against the Niners going into halftime the previous week. Even though that game wasn't close, that was a sequence that we talked about. Packers operated much, much better going into halftime this week. The more we watch this team, and we've now got about a full season, I think, of good sample size. Let's start with the Steelers game last year when the Packers really started to put some things together and the wide receivers really started to click, and they're like, okay, now we know where to line up. And Jordan Love actually kind of has a feel, and the team kind of came together. Since that moment, we got a pretty good sample size since, let's say, the Steelers game last year. It's becoming so evident this team needs to start fast. They need to get off to a quality start. And it's not that they don't have the horses to come from behind. They do. They have the offensive firepower. They can put up 400 yards in the right situation very easily. A great running game, an offensive line that can protect and that can really run block this year. Their quarterback can make all of the throws, and their head coach has a really good scheme. So it's not that they can't come from behind it. It's not necessarily that they don't have the facilities. It's not like the Badgers, for example, in 2016 with Bart Houston, Alex Hornibrook. That was the team that needed to get a lead and play with their defense. Like they didn't have the manpower. They weren't the type of team that could close a gap. The Packers can close a gap. It's more of a vibes thing, right? To get the offense rolling, to get positive momentum, so the offense can be in control and dictate terms of the game, so the defense can play the way that they want to play. This team is just so much better if you look over the last year, really since the Steelers game. When they get the ball first and they score first and the ball gets rolling early, they're so much better than when they get off to a clunky start. And I know that would probably be true of most teams, but I think it's especially true of this Packers team, getting off to a fast start. And by the way, Tucker Kraft, when asked, I think this is yesterday, again, my days are a little bit turned around. Tucker Kraft was asked yesterday about heading to Detroit. And I think this soundbite is important for multiple reasons. And it's important for a reason that we'll get into later in the week as well when it comes to the Lions game. But just for the purposes of starting fast, listen to Tucker Kraft talking about going to Detroit, and you'll hear it in his answer here.
Ford Field gets loud, big rectangle, that place is. And then, that's a place where the atmosphere thrives. Their defense will play good behind that. So we'd like to establish our offense as soon as we can. We don't have to use silent cadence. Hopefully we get some of the fans leaving early like we did last Thanksgiving. So we're ready.
So there's some commentary about the Lions in there that is secondary. I just wanted that comment about we want to get our offense established early, because I think this offense can get a little directionless. They can get a little lost in the sauce. But when they take the ball early, and you go back and look when they played really well last year, they took the ball to begin the game when they won the toss. We want to drive down. We want to start the game on our terms. There's such a better team when they play that way. And Thursday night was an example. And secondary effect, you put the pressure on the Dolphins to have to execute right away in the cold. You don't give them any breathing room. If you can't make throws in the cold, you're going to be down 21-0. And they were. And that's what they didn't do against the Lions in the rain a month or so ago. And maybe if the Packers don't commit penalties and Jordan Love doesn't throw that pick six, maybe the Lions still play awesome for 4 quarters and they still win. But my point is the Packers didn't make the Lions execute at a high level for 4 straight quarters in the rain. They forced the Dolphins to need to execute for 4 straight quarters in the cold. They didn't do it. And while the Dolphins are certainly less dangerous in the cold, the Packers still get credit for the way they dictated terms of that game and the way they kind of set things up and forced the Dolphins to really lose that game in the first half by not being able to execute. Okay. I want to talk about the Badgers for a couple minutes as well. And after our first break, I'm going to completely throw it to you. If you want to bounce between college football and pro football, that's fine. If you want to do 2 hours Packers, I don't care. I'll do whatever. But one take on the Badgers, just a thought before we take a break. It's not worth talking about the Minnesota game at all. If you listen to the camp with Zach and Jesse, they said the same thing from the rip on their Sunday podcast. It's like, what's the point of even, who cares about the game, right? It's wild to me that the Badgers lost the axe. And in a sense, fans really don't care because it's small potatoes. It's like, oh yeah, PJ Fleck, the Gophers in the axe. Okay, but Luke Fickell, what is actually going on? And how is it going to get better? A lot of Badgers fans are concerned about the big picture. Friday's game is just a small piece of a much, much larger problem in this program right now. And I don't mean to hop on the show here 14 minutes in and be negative Nelly, okay, or negative Neil, I guess to be gender specific. But we all grasp how bad this is, right? Like, we understand this. Well, it's a down year for the program. Just got to let him, you get his guys in here, establishes. No, we're past that. Our measuring stick for failure for Badgers football is Gary Anderson and the Paul Chryst era at the end. And I'm not going to revise history and go back and say they never should have fired Paul Chryst, because I think something needed to happen. Now, whether or not the Fickle hire works out, it's certainly not working out so far. That's another thing. Firing Chryst, I was fine with. But we always talk about, wow, go back to the Gary Anderson days. For reference, by the way, Gary Anderson went 11-3, 7-1 in the Big Ten, and 9-4, 6-2 in the Big Ten in 2013 and 2014. He was 6-1 combined against Northwestern, Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota with a scoring margin of 216 to 114. Luke Fickell in 2 years against those teams is 2-5 with a scoring margin of 123 to 183. They've been outscored by 60 plus points to those, five teams? Northwestern, Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota. I just counted those 4. You could probably include Illinois, but they don't play Illinois every year. Those are the classic Big Ten West opponents that the base of every season has kind of been built on for Badgers football, really for my entire lifetime. And Gary Anderson was so much better. Gary Anderson is our measuring stick for bad Badgers football. This isn't just worse. This is much worse. This is so much worse. This doesn't even compare to the wins and the losses of the Gary Anderson era. It's like, but they got beat by Ohio State 59-0. I'd rather get beat by Ohio State 59-0 than whatever happened against Iowa a couple weeks ago, or Nebraska, or Minnesota. Those 3 games were an embarrassment. You get embarrassed by Ohio State. Okay, Ohio State might have the most resources of any program in the country. That team is a juggernaut. Iowa's not. Nebraska's not. Minnesota's not. Northwestern's not. And I know they beat Northwestern this year, which would be one thing if they didn't get embarrassed at home by Northwestern last year, but they did. So, okay, we broke even against Northwestern so far in the Luke Fickell era. I saw Badger offensive lineman Ben Barton kind of relayed a Fickell comment meeting with the media postgame on Friday. He basically said, as Coach Fick says, this isn't the Big Ten West anymore. Which I don't mean to parse out his words too much, because it's probably a paraphrase, part of a bigger point. But like, if that message is getting preached, well, this ain't the Big Ten West anymore. Okay, well, that comment's getting at one of two things. That comment is either hinting at the schedule of the Badgers, which has changed, or that comment is getting at the quality of the Big Ten West. And either bit of commentary would be really wrong. Because if it's a scheduling comment, it's irrelevant. Well, it's not the Big Ten West anymore. Okay, sure. That'd be one thing if you were winning your games against the Big Ten West, but you're not, right? If the Badgers were only losing right now to Penn State and Oregon and Bama and USC, fine. But your worst games came against your biggest rivals in the Big Ten West. So ain't the Big Ten West anymore. That would be one thing if you were beating the Big Ten West, which you're not. And if that comment is a comment on the quality of opponent, almost as saying, well, this Big Ten West, it ain't the same anymore. Yes, it is. Northwestern's the same as they've ever been. Iowa hasn't changed in 40 years. They're the same team they were 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Nebraska spent big on Raiola, but they still stink. And they scored 44 on you. Minnesota, dress it up with whatever coach. Jerry Kill actually had the Gophers playing as good as I can remember in this era. PJ Fleck's mostly been middle of the road at best. So it ain't the Big Ten West anymore. If that's a commentary on the Big Ten West, it's wrong. And if the commentary on the schedule, that's wrong too, because you can't beat these teams. Be one thing if you were only losing to the blue chippers who have now entered the Big Ten, but that's not true. In fact, you're only going to have a harder time against newer Big Ten scheduling type of opponents next year. And I just don't buy a single word that Fickell is selling right now. Trust the process. It's become such an overblown bit of commentary in sports. Trust the process. Trust the process. What process? Or more importantly, what progress? Forget about a process. What progress do we have to see? And Fickell knows it. This exchange, and if you're watching on the live stream, I'll show you the video as well, because I think it's nice when you can see Fickell's face answering this question. And shout out to Badger Athletics. They post this on their YouTube and on their socials. That's where I got it. You're going to hear an exchange with Jim Polzien going back and forth, who he asked a question, and I don't know that Fickell really loved having to answer it. And then Polzien said, no, this is why I'm asking. I'd like you to please answer. And you can hear his follow-up. Here's Fickell from Friday evening.
Luke, what's your message to fans right now?
Yeah, I've talked to the players. I told the players.
Fans are concerned about the direction of this program. What would you tell them right now?
Those, just like I told the players, those that stay will be a champion, and you got to have people that believe in you. And I know it's hard. Having faith is things you can't see, and right now I'm sure they can't see it either, and that's the tough part.
We cannot.
But they got to believe, and they're going to have to, obviously seeing is believing, and I don't worry as much about them as I worry about those guys in that locker room. Our job to get them to believe is to put the product on the field, and right now we don't have that opportunity, and we haven't done it. So I would understand if they, are worried. It's their prerogative, and our job is to prove it, and we haven't done that, but we will.
I would understand if they're worried. It's not confidence inducing. Now, to be fair to Fickle, if they had Graham Mertz level quarterback play this year, they probably win 2 more games. And then, if you're able to win either against Penn State or Oregon, then maybe you don't have the letdown the next week. And maybe that means you win 3 more games. I don't know that means the program is in a much better spot, but you're not missing a bowl. You're not only a 5-win team. So if you have thoughts on the Packers or the Badgers, we can bounce back and forth. We don't have to stick with one or the other today. I'll take your calls next. 608-321-1670.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
It's really tough to kind of say where we are. Obviously, we're not in a good place. We're 5-7, and really we're just not even playing well. we got a job to do. We got a job to prepare guys to get ready to play a game, and their job is to play the game. And unfortunately, we haven't done that for quite a while.
That's Luke Fickell. You're supposed to make us feel better in the press conference, Luke. You're supposed to. You're not just supposed to state the obvious about how bad you've been. But that kind of is how his postgame presser on Friday went after losing to the Gophers. What was the final score? 24-7. Doesn't matter. I don't remember a single play from that game other than a compilation that kind of melted together in my brain while I was eating Thanksgiving leftovers of Braden Locke just throwing the ball off of the helmets of defensive linemen. It's funny because the commentators early on in the game, all these defensive linemen, you can tell they've been coached. They prepared, they watched film, and they know if you're not going to get home, get your hands up in the air. And I tweeted, it's like, you can tell these Minnesota defensive linemen are doing a good job getting their arms up. However, it doesn't matter at all because Braden Locke's throwing it off their helmet. He's not even throwing it off their arms. He's throwing it right off the face mask. Guys could be facing the other way. Throw it right off the back of their helmet. Doesn't even need the arms up in the air. I have a feeling we're probably going to talk more about the Packers tonight than the Badgers, but because we left off with the Badgers before the break, and I got a comment or two, one on Twitter and one on the text line that I want to address, I want to give you one more Badgers thought before probably going back to the Packers, because I think that's mostly what people probably want to talk about today. I got a tweet from Badger Bloody Reviews who said, snake oil salesman, says that of Luke Fickell. He tweeted that at me, at Wisco Grant. I don't think that I agree with that. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you, hey, Fickell's got a plan. Fickell knows what he's doing. He might. If that's true, you have to go completely 100% on blind faith right now because we've seen no evidence to support that he does have a plan or that he's capable of bringing this program along or making progress because the trajectory is just going down, 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 down. And have you looked at the schedule for next year? I wouldn't hold my breath that it's going to get better next year. We'll see. I'm not trying to be negative Ned here. I live in the real world. I watch the games and I react to the score, which is I think it's very common sense. I think that's the way you should watch sports. But I know a lot of Badgers fans are like, trust the process, which I'm not sure what the process. I'll trust the process if there's a process. I don't think there's a process. But Badger Bloody, you're saying snake oil salesman. I don't think he's a snake oil salesman. I just think he's lost. And I think those are two different things. I don't think Luke Fickell's sitting at the podium trying to sell us. Hey guys, I got a plan and I know where this is going. He would like to think that. I don't think he's a snake oil salesman. I just think he's a bad sales. He's trying to sell a product that's not any good, and no one's buying it. It's not that he's selling us snake oil. It's that he can't sell us on anything because he has nothing to sell. Right. And this kind of connects in my brain of a comment that I listened to Zach and Jesse make on the camp when I listened on Saturday night. By the way, fun night out in Eau Claire. I listened to the podcast when I was driving over there. I had a blast out in Eau Claire. But I was listening to that podcast and I can't remember if it was Zach or Jesse. I think it was Zach who pushed back on the idea that the Badgers quit down the stretch. I don't know if it was a listener submitted question to their mailbag or whatever. Zach was reacting to the idea that the Badgers quit. And he's like, guys, I don't think they quit. I just don't think they're very good. And I would agree with that. And that's along the same lines as snake oil salesman. I don't think he's a snake oil salesman. He just doesn't know what to do. And what's the old expression? Never ascribe to malice what can be explained with stupidity, right? It's the same kind of thing. I'm not explaining away what's going on with Luke Fickell is snake oil sales. I'm not ascribing malice to this. I don't think they quit. I don't think Luke Fickell's a snake oil salesman. I just don't think he's a good coach right now, and I don't think the team is very good. I think it's very simple, right? So that's what your tweet made me think of Badger Bloody. Not to turn one tweet from Badger Bloody Reviews into 5 minutes on the show, but I just wanted to react to that. All right, Packers, Badgers, whatever's on your mind, I'll take your calls. 608-321-1670. Let's take a call. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, Grant.
Hey, who's this?
Luke from Eau Claire.
Hey,
Sorry.
Luke. Hey, no, Luke. Welcome. What's going on?
First time caller.
Hell yeah.
I want to call in all the time and I want to say my piece, but I'd like to talk Badgers. You're doing a great job. Snake oil, no. People forget that Luke Fickell turned around a Cincinnati program it took a while, right? And he was handed basically nothing with what he had on the roster, nothing that fit his scheme, which we've since found out is not the scheme that they're going to run going forward.
offensively. I don't know about defensively. I don't know that he's set to make material changes to defense. I don't know. I think he has to. I don't know specifics on that, but continue your call. I guess that's not really that important. Okay.
That's fair. He may or may not change there. He probably should. But he brought in transfers, but we give too much credit to transfers because transfers are the best of what's available. It's not the top of the line recruits that are all over the place. He went out and got a quarterback from Miami who was going to work, but it wasn't a 5-star recruit from some wherever. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So I think we got to give him. In the past, we've always given head coaches 4 years. I think we got to give him 4 years. Whether that's going to be a painful 4 years or not, it's too early to say. Get rid of the guy.
I know. I appreciate the call, Luke. Thanks for listening up in Eau Claire, WAYY. He's not going anywhere. This always happens when I am critical of Matt LaFleur, or when sports talk people are critical of a coach, or people get, okay, well, who's better then? Who do you want to bring in to replace him? Nobody. I'm not saying I want him fired. I want him to be better. I want him to figure it out, right? Luke Fickell's almost certainly not going to get fired. The money is huge, and also Chris McIntosh firing Luke Fickell is also kind of shooting himself I wouldn't even say shooting himself in the foot. I'd say that's shooting himself in the leg. It's not completely killing his career as an athletic director, but geez, it's like, hey, the guy that I blew out Paul Chryst for, which I thought was fine. You want to move on from Paul Chryst as college football modernizes? I don't have a problem with that. Whether or not Luke Fickell turns out to be the wrong hire, we'll see. But those two things can be independent. I think he's got to make a change. I think he's got to make changes on the defense. I don't think they can run back the same defense. You guys, Iowa ran the ball for 320 yards on him, and Nebraska scored 44 on them. Did you watch Nebraska-Iowa on was that Friday night or Saturday? I don't remember which night. Those two teams had their way with Wisconsin's defense. And you can read in between the lines of some transfer portal decisions as well. Like Leon Lowry comes out and says, I'm transferring. They wanted me to put my hand in the dirt. I've never been a guy my whole career who's put my hand in the dirt. And I thought Zach on the camp in the episode I was listening to today did a good job pointing out, if Wisconsin's idea of stopping the run in the Big Ten West is asking a 250-pound linebacker to put their hand in then they're toast. They're dead on arrival, like they were all year, right? So Luke, who called from up in Eau Claire, to your point, Luke, like I don't know if he is set to make big-time changes on the defense. I think the easiest fix is they get way better players like they had at the end with Paul Chryst and Fickell. They ran the same front. They ran a lot of 2 defensive linemen, 2 outside backer sets with Jim Leonard. It's not like that's a completely bizarre, exotic scheme from what they had been running. The players just aren't any good. Or they're not good enough. Hey, if you watch NFL games, who's making plays? Oh, there's Zach Bond, there's Nick Herbig, there's TJ Watt, there's and going back even farther, even guys who didn't turn into NFL stars. Leon Jacobs was awesome. Zach Sitchy was awesome. Van Ginkel was awesome. Even Ryan Connolly, who's like the 6th or 7th backer that comes to mind, was still awesome. Did they have a Ryan Connolly on this team? No. So if Luke Fickell doesn't plan on getting way more talented and way more physical along the defensive front, you can't hope to bring back Mike Tressel in the same scheme and have it be any better next year, especially now the team smell blood in the water. It's like, oh, you can run on Wisconsin now? Hallelujah. Awesome. We'll just do that. I don't know. I'm with you. Fickell's not going anywhere. He's going to be given time to figure this out. I'm just really doubting that he can at this point, and I'm doubting that it's going to get better. I hope it does. Not to be Mr. Negative today. I'm just watching the games and reacting to them. That's all we have to go off of. 608-321-1670 if you have thoughts on the Badgers. Let's talk about the Packers next as well. I'll take more of your calls. We'll talk more football.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
I mean, this was the most obvious game ever. Mike McDaniel was shivering on the sideline.
He was all bundled up too.
He was shivering on the sideline.
It was a bad scene, and then Tua did not rewrite the narratives. That's tough. He still hasn't won a game under 40 degrees, I believe.
Yeah, and I mean, they made a valiant comeback late. Yeah. It was like, hey, maybe if they score, they got stopped at the goal line. But the stat that there's two stats that are like when everyone's like, hey, you can't just say candy ass uniforms, the Dolphins can't win in the cold. I have two stats for you that show you absolutely can. The first one is the Dolphins had 20 missed tackles to give up 132 extra yards. That's a cold weather stat. That's I don't want to get my nose into the pile. I don't want to tackle anyone. And the second stat is Mike McDaniel was literally shivering on the side.
He was so cold.
He was so cold.
He looked like the kid from the Christmas Story, all bundled up. He couldn't like move his extremity. If he had to challenge a call, I don't think he'd be able to find the flag.
little bit from Pardon My Take as they react to Packers Dolphins. And it's easy to say after the fact, and gamblers, you know this. I should have bet more on Packers Dolphins. Most obvious result ever. How could I not seen that coming? If you want to keep talking Badgers, we can. If you have a Packers thought, I would love to take your call. Tim, not Tom, and Madison with a Badgers thought, and then I'm going to go to the phones. So there's a balance between good offense and good defense. That defense spent a lot of time on the field this year. If the offense performed better, that gives the defense time off. There were 2 or 3 games the defense played well enough to win, and honestly, I think they were gassed by the end of the year. I agree. There were times where Wisconsin in the past were top 10 overall defense, but they weren't that good offensively because the offense just because the offense played keep away the whole time. When they got into bigger games, the defense was exposed. Yep, I think that's very true. And it's worth mentioning, right? We always say this in sports talk radio. 2 things can be true. Both things can be true. Thing A, Luke Fickell, I think, is without answers right now. I don't think he's a snake oil salesman. I just don't think he has answers. I don't think he has buttons to push or levers to pull. I just think he's at the end of the rope right now. That's not to say he's going to get fired. Everything that he's tried to do has not worked. Things that he thought he could bring to Wisconsin to succeed have not succeeded. It hasn't worked. And to say, trust the process, what process? I see no process. That is true. Thing B, if they just had a quarterback that didn't blow chunks, respectfully to Braden Locke, they win the Oregon game. I think they'd probably win the Penn State game. And then that gets you into bigger discussion. Well, if they don't let down against Oregon and Penn State, do they show up flat the next week against Iowa and Nebraska, respectively, right? Like, it's not hard to do the math. It's like, well, if Braden Locke just didn't suck, could they have won 2 or 3 more games? Yeah. I still don't know that that would change the reality with Fickell, but you'd feel like at least you took a step this year, and you would have gotten 1 signature win. Luke Fickell is 2 years deep, and he still hasn't gotten 1, let alone multiple signature wins. So if you want to talk more about that or you want to get into the Packers, I have plenty to say on both, so we can go whatever direction you want to go today. 608-321-1670, Wisco Sports Show. Who's this? Hello?
Hello?
Hello, yes. Who's this?
Hi, this is Fred from Fall City.
Fall City? What's going on, Fred?
Fall City. Really?
Fall City, Wisconsin?
Yeah.
Fall City. Oh, muddy.
Between Menominee and Elk Mountain.
Nice. I was going to say, I saw Muddy Creek. It's like, so Elk Mountain. Okay. Well, all right. Well, I learned it, which is embarrassing for me because I grew up very close to there. Sorry about that, Fred. What's going on? You want to talk Packers or Badgers or what's up?
Badgers.
Sure.
I agree that Fickell gets, at least probably 2 more years. Whether, and I agree he hasn't shown that or done anything to make you think that those 2 years are going to turn stuff around. The thing that that gets me is like, yeah, Leonard ran a lot of 2-4-5 defense, but 1, he had personnel to do it, and 2, he did that more situationally.
Sure.
Like versus Iowa, I saw a stat versus the 2-4-5, Iowa averaged 10 yards a carry per rush. 10 yards a carry. And they kept doing it.
Yeah, they didn't have a second pitch. Yeah.
They kept trotting that out there to the point where Iowa threw like 10 times the whole game. Now, to me, that speaks to that's almost a fireable offense right there. You keep trotting out that 2-man defensive front, and they're averaging 10 yards a carry. I'm sorry, that's malfeasance.
And it's frustrating too when you watch it for the whole game. It's like, okay, if you get blown away for a quarter and a half, that's one thing. All right, so you completely guessed wrong or you prepared incorrectly, but then you got to adjust. You're right. They didn't really have another pitch. And like, even if a defensive coordinator like Mike Tressel, Fred, has a scheme or has a system he wants to run, there needs to be, extenuating circumstance. Well, this week we're playing Iowa, so we need to do a little bit more to beef it up on the line, considering their quarterback can't throw. And to your point, they didn't do that at all, which is concerning. That would make you question any coach, even at the high school level. You'd be like, hey, it's not working. You got to try something else, right, Fred?
That's the part that and you combine that with, like you say, he doesn't have any answers right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's very concerning to me. I mean, And like you, I think you already mentioned the schedule next year is no better, and I don't see guys that are ready to make that jump to be the impact players that they need. So where does that come from next year?
They're probably going to have to hit on some guys in the transfer portal and hope that some of these recruits really start to pop and come through. Fred, I got to get to another call, but can I ask you about Falls City for a sec? So I looked this up. Is it even a census designated place? I thought that this area was Springbrook. That's what I knew this area as, just north of Caryville, which, by the way, that's definitely haunted. I've been there. That's not an urban legend. That place is spooky, respectfully.
Yeah, it's Springbrook Township, right off of it's off from Highway C.
Yeah, right around the corner from Grandpa Lloyd's horse barn. I used to go play music there.
Sure.
Sure. I love how, Fred, I love you. Please call back sometime. I love how you said that as if that's like Fred, that is the most niche landmark in the entire state of Wisconsin. I just gave you the name of Grandpa Lloyd's horse barn. You're like, yeah, it's right around the corner. Right up the way from Thunder Hill. Everyone knows where that is. Of course. Just north of Caryville. That place is haunted, by the way. I've been there. I drove there in high school. It's like, I hear this place is haunted. We went there. No, will not go back. Place is spooky. Might have watched a scary movie the night before, which probably didn't help. Those are great points, Fred. Falls City. It doesn't even have a Wikipedia page, Fred. Like, I clicked on it. It's like no data. What is there? Like 6 people technically that live in? I don't even think it's a census designated place. That rules, Fred. I love that call. Thank you. 608-321-1670. Talking Badgers and Packers. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Frank the Tank from Eau Claire.
Frank the Tank in Eau Claire. We got a lot of callers who don't often call in. What's going on, Frank?
Hey, you're talking about comparing the Badgers, and the Badgers disappointing, and Luke Fickell, I know you say 2 more years. I think 1 more.
I agree.
But,
yeah.
I mean, you talk about Anderson, you compare I remember Don Morton days. Don Morton, and when I went to his Badger camp back in the 80s, and at the time, too, the gas in Madison was 86 cents a gallon at that time.
Yeah,
yeah. So,
back in the good old days, Frank. Yeah.
I remember going to the camp there, and the guy told me, "Yeah, we're changing the whole thing, and we're going with like tight end size linemen." And I'm like, "That's not really." And I'm 6'4", 200 plus.
Well, you're a tank.
I'm a big guy.
You're Frank the Tank for a reason, Frank.
Yeah. So like Don Morton, man, I remember him getting beat by Michigan, putting in like their 3rd string and just running 65 to I don't even think Badgers was 65 to nothing. I think Michigan killed him that year. But Don Morton's idea was more athletic linemen, more thinner, lighter, and that just doesn't work in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I thought, was it Fred in Falls City? That call just threw me for a loop. I am as nerdy with Wisconsin maps as anybody. And I grew up not a half hour, probably like 40 minutes from there. And that threw me for a loop. But Fred made an awesome point. It's like Leonard ran a lot of the same stuff. Like, he wasn't afraid to go 2 down defensive linemen with 2 outside backers like that. That is a lighter front. You also got to know when to beef it up a little bit more. And they would sometimes. So they weren't, they weren't so stubborn as if to never put additional defensive linemen or bring guys down to help support against the run, especially against teams like Iowa. But also, they had Nick Herbig and TJ Watt. Like, they had stud outside backers. They had Leon Lowry, who just transferred because he was kind of a non-factor. He was a non-factor before at Syracuse. He was a non-factor here. He's probably going to be a non-factor where he goes next. He's 22, and he's like, they just don't have the personnel. And they're stubborn with the scheme, which is why I just don't think Luke Fickell can run it back exactly the same on defense next year. He can bring back Mike Tressel, but Mike Tressel needs to have learned something this year. And I think I'm with Frank. If next year goes as badly as this year went, and there's reason to believe that it could go worse. They got to go 2 outs in to play Oregon. They got to go to the Big House in Michigan. They got to go to Indiana to play Kurt Signetti. They got to go to TCF Bank, which is whatever, but they just lost to Minnesota at home. They got to host Washington, host Ohio State, and they got to go to Tuscaloosa. And I just don't see a scenario where the Badgers are worse next year and McIntosh is able to keep this guy. Even if I don't think bringing in another coach will fix it. Like, Badgers fans will be so over it. I don't think he'll have a choice. So 4 years, if next year is also really bad, I'd like to think 4 years for sure, but I can't. I can't say that definitively. 608-321-1670, Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Grant, greetings and salutations. We'll move quickly here.
In Madison. All right, now I know where Madison is, Vagabond John. What's up? Go ahead.
we're massive. Love all the energy for a Badger Monday. I know you wanted to talk Packers, and Packers fans, they're kicking ass. Keep it going. For the love of God, stop freaking out every time the other team gets the first down.
Yeah.
For the Badgers, just a couple of things. Luke and Auclair mentioned, he said Cincinnati took a long time for its turnaround. They went from 4-8 to 11-2. Not to be, a full actually call, but it's coming here, right? So in his second year, he got 11 wins, right? We give all coaches 4 years. No, we don't. We hated the Gary Anderson era, and he was here for like a year and a half.
And he beat his rivals. So, we remember Gary Anderson like he won 5 games.
Right, and he was here for like a year and a half, 2 years. Scheme change on defense. The Leon Lowry comments are interesting. The snake oil salesman thing for me is he sells an idea and then he doesn't follow through with it. So not only is it a bad product, like you mentioned, he doesn't have a product to sell, but he's not even following through with the basic customer service, right? If you listen to his August presser, which I went back like a psychopath did today, he talked about how healthy Ches Malusi was. They were doing live tackling with Ches Malusi because his body's in the best shape he's ever been. He could not wait to see. Half the press conference was about Ches Malusi. So I don't know, man. Going into year 3 after this season, he's on the hot seat, right? His seat couldn't be hotter. But before I leave you, Grant, Keanu Benton, which state was he from?
See, I'm a bad person to ask, but just make your point.
Janesville, right?
Yeah,
Janesville, right?
Yep.
Leo Chanel from small town Wisconsin,
Transfer.
3-star guys, not highly touted, right? But Wisconsin recruited them, and they turned into studs. You look at Jesse Temple's awesome article today in The Athletic, and he outlines what Wisconsin high school football coaches are saying, and it's all the same message. They have different tones in what they're saying, but Luke Fickell is chasing stars, getting Wisconsin fans slobbering over a New Mexico linebacker rather than looking in his backyard, and Badger football won't be the same until he's gone.
So it is an excellent article. Everyone should read it. Thank you, Vagabond John. Good timing. You're up against it. I thought you were going to go on some rant about how Purdue has higher standards than Wisconsin, given that they just fired their guy, because I saw you tweeting about that. And maybe you would have if we were up against a break and you're a regular caller, so you know the timing of this. I'm excited about Posa. Listen, I can be excited about the New Mexico kid, but also want them to, I want that Green Bay running back. The kicker today decommitted from Wisconsin or decided Notre Dame instead. They're not. Yes, I don't need to elaborate on what Vagabond John said. It was a good call. He delivered his points well. I agree with everything. Let's take our final break of the hour. If you're on hold, stay there. I promise I'll get to you. I just need a break.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Wisco Sports Show, an hour away from the Monday mailbag, so submit your questions, grantbills21@gmail.com. I have some Packers takes for you, and if you have anything to add in hour number 2, we'll get there in just a couple minutes after 5 o'clock, and our sports update from Zach Heilprin. Let's take a call quick. Thank you for waiting through the break. 608-321-1670, Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
This is Justin from Eau Claire.
Hey, Justin, what's going on? I was in your city on Saturday night. I had an absolute blast and a half of a time.
I was going to say, what were you doing here?
Well, I have a bunch of college friends who are from the area, so if we're all home at the same time, we try to meet up. We went to Growler Guys. This was right around the corner from my buddy's apartment, and then we went to Ray's. I'd never been to Ray's before. They have Liney's Heavy on tap and delicious sandwiches all hours.
I love Ray's. Yeah,
it's
their
great.
hot beefs are great, and the prices are great.
Yeah,
if you're ever in Eau Claire, stop in at Texas Roadhouse. You might see me. I serve and bartend there. Anyways, wanted to talk a little bit about the Badgers.
Hit me.
So I understand that we want people recruited from Wisconsin, but I'm not going to be mad at Fickle for going after blue chips, because something that every team that is competing for a national title, but this team's not competing for a national title for a little bit. They're quite far, but they have a high number of blue chips. So if we can at least get that started, that would be nice, rather than just doing what Paul Chris did and taking a bunch of 3-stars from around the state and developing them, because we don't have the D coordinators that we had. I think it was Justin Wilcox and Jim Leonard back to back.
Aranda as well. Like they had great coordinators.
Yeah,
I think it was more than the coordinators, the way that it was the whole thing, right? Down to the assistant coaches and just the way that they developed players, mostly from in-state. Like the whole operation was just operating at such a high level.
Very true. Also, I hated the loss to Minnesota and hate whenever they lose, but I am very happy I don't have to watch Braden Locke throw another pass this year. I will say, if there's one thing I'm grateful for, it's that.
So that's another thing. They asked Braden Locke, and anything else, Justin? I got about 30 seconds. Anything else you want to get in, or are you good?
Didn't like the shade on the Orange Bowl MVP, Alex Hornibrook, and excited for Badger volleyball and basketball. That's all.
So those are great takes. Alex Hornibrook had 2 awesome career games. One was the Orange Bowl. Was the other the BYU game? I can't remember. He had 2 excellent games. One was the Orange Bowl. I think the other one was BYU. So I mean, he sucked, and no one liked him. He's great in the Orange Bowl, and that Orange Bowl, was that the one against Mark Richt? That was one of Paul Christ's finer moments. I liked Paul Christ. I just don't know that Paul Christ had much of an appetite for doing a lot of the things that he needed to do moving forward in college football, and he'd be far from the only one. So he's probably happier than most that he got out and got his money and didn't have to do all that crap. Justin, I would agree with you on the blue chip thing if I thought this was eventually going to pay off with Wisconsin being on the same level as Oregon, Ohio State. And I think I like Fickle still, but I have a hard time believing that that's the end goal here. We can talk more about that. Hour number 2, more of your thoughts. First, 2-minute update from Zach Heilprin. No commercials. Stick around.
This is a Wisconsin Sports Zone update.
Well, Jair Alexander and Romeo Dobbs were on the practice field today as limited participants. Alexander's missed the last 2 games with a knee injury. Dobbs missed the Miami game with a concussion. He's still in the protocol, but making progress as the team prepares for a trip to Detroit on Thursday. Green Bay lost to the Lions earlier this year, but have won 3 straight since then. They also have a recent memory of going into Ford Field last year on Thanksgiving and beating the Lions. The quarterback, Jordan Love, says whether they had won that game or not, the entire team has confidence in what they're doing right now.
Yeah, I mean, you can lean on that, but I think no matter who it is, if we had a whole new team, guys be confident. We're confident every game we go into, and obviously, I think we have enough motivation having lost the first game to these guys. So, we owe them, and we'll be able to go put up a good fight in Detroit. But I'm confident that everybody's going to be ready for this game.
Going to be the Packers and Lions on Thursday night in Detroit. Kick is at 7:15. Turning to the Badgers, they're in full off-season mode after failing to make a bowl game for the first time in 23 years. Wisconsin expected to sign a top 25 recruiting class on Wednesday. The transfer portal opens on Monday.
Actor portrayal.
When I first looked into life insurance, I worried about the hassle. Then I found Better Life. Their simplified issue whole life coverage plans mean no medical exam. I found a plan that fit my budget, and now my final expenses are covered. Plus, I get Better Life member benefits at no extra cost. That's definitely better.
Better Life Insurance, where better means belonging. Call 888-488-4136. Insurance issued by Better Life Insurance Company. Terms and conditions apply. Member benefits are subject to change. Contact a licensed agent for details.
Well, the Wisconsin basketball team up 4 spots in the latest AP Top 25 to number 11 in the country. They'll put their unbeaten record on the line tomorrow night against Michigan, and the Bucks going to be in Detroit to face the Pistons tomorrow night. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heil, print.
It's always about the locker room. It's on them to embrace it and continue to push each other to get better and better and better. And that's really all we're all about. Continue to work at it. We've got a great group.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm still getting over Fred's call from Falls City. First of all, his football points were awesome. And we have callers from all over the place: Chippewa Falls, Lake Hallie, Cornell. I'm talking strictly about WAYY, our affiliate up in Eau Claire. Just so bold of Fred to be like, yeah, Falls City. Population like 10, right around the corner from Springbrook Meats. It's like, Fred, you can't. That's just an awesome call. That might be the call of the week already, and we're not even underway in hour 2 yet. It's the Wisco Sports Show. My name is Grant Bills. Twitter at Wisco Grant. You call and text the show 608-321-1670. We have 3 callers loaded and ready on hold. If you want to keep talking Badgers, I will. I didn't think we talked this much Badgers tonight. I figured most would want to talk about the Packers. And don't get me wrong, I think as the week goes along, we'll pick up Packers steam because we'll talk more and more about Detroit. Today, we're still kind of picking through that win over Miami, and they beat a warm weather team and did a lot of good things that we already saw them do against the Niners. So I guess it's not a total shock that people aren't busting at the seams with Packers takes. I think we'll talk more Packers between now and 6 o'clock. But on Mondays, I typically get the ball rolling, and I kind of bounce off of what you guys want to talk about. So let's get right back into the call. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Mr. Grant.
Dave from Winona.
Off to see the Wizard. I kept telling you people the last couple of years, Dave from Winona is never wrong, but nobody listens to the bat thing. It's the bat girl, and the last caller kind of hit on it. Bat girl goes after the Stars. The reason this Wisconsin was 9-2, 10-3, competing for Big Ten championships is because they recruited the 2 and 3 stars. They developed them. They kept them here. I told Ebo this morning, if you're going to get a quarterback, develop him, keep him here, and pay him instead of worrying about taking somebody else's junk from another school. They transfer him because, 1, they hated where they were, and 2, the first time you get some discomfort, they're going to leave. And I can only imagine the Wisconsin high school programs, coaches, that's the first thing Alvarez did. He came in and put a wrap around the state of Wisconsin. Bielema did it. Gary Anderson wanted to lower.
Fickle said he was going to do it, didn't he? Like,
but he didn't do it.
I know, but I'm not misremembering that. Like, he didn't come in and say, "Hey, we're going to expand." I thought I remember when he came in, he's like, "We're going to wall around the state. That's going to be the lifeblood of our program."
They say it, but then all of a sudden,
you didn't buy it.
Transfer and the nil money, and Anderson came in and wanted to lower the academic standards. That's why he left in the middle of the night, and it's back-to-back years. You chase the stars, you chase the failures. This program will be a 10-2 team, 11-2 again, once they revert back to draft and develop, because they're not going to want to leave. The majority of them are going to want to stick around, and you pay those who stick around, not those who come from other high school programs. And I told you from day one why I hated Fickle. He does nothing for the public. He came in here. You don't hear no Mendota Gridiron Club with the fans, ticket holders. Nothing. Him and his family did nothing to engage themselves in the off season. Going out to events, zero. And when you do that, what do you think is going to happen? No one's going to have your back when you don't go out and make the effort to get to know the fans. And the same with the players. They transfer in, they get $400,000. They don't care. They're not going out and signing those autographs for kids unless they're being paid. But nobody listens to Dave. But solution is, yes, we're never going to be able to go back. You can't go back.
This is what the problem is everyone, Dave, it's like, well, we'll go back to doing the way that it was. Well, the problem is when you have a couple losing seasons after neglecting the Wisconsin players a little bit, you have to rebuild, right? You have to dig yourself out of that hole. That's difficult.
Too late for Batgirl to go back now and reopen that. That genie has left the bottle for the high school coaches. They're not going to give him a time of day. If they've been treated like that the last couple of years, they're just going to wait and have their players go somewhere else until McIntosh. He's the one that's got to go. He brought this crap show in here, thinking, hey, we're going to hit the big time like Alvarez did with Gary Anderson. You weren't around then, but they all thought Anderson was going to nationally recruit the 5 stars, bring in the athletes from down south. Well, what they didn't realize, most of them couldn't write their names, and they flunked out of school.
Yeah.
And that ain't going to work. But other than that, no. I try to tell people the Batgirl, it isn't going to work. They're going to be 0-6 already next year. Then what, fans? And one last thing.
Please.
$40 million buyout. Who cares? You pay the $40 million and you move on.
Well, so I'm not going to pretend that I understand the economics of all of that, but I don't think any booster is going to step up and cut that check. And that money has to come from somewhere, which is going to hurt him in other departments. I think next year would have to be so bad for him to get fired. But man, imagine if things are even worse next year. And I think Badger fans are smart enough to understand that the schedule is difficult. But Badger fans are also smart enough to realize, hey, for years and years and years, the standard was beating Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota. Those teams didn't all of the sudden turn into powerhouses. I can deal with a loss to Oregon or Penn State, even if it's close and I feel like we should have won. I can deal with that. I can't deal with giving up 320 yards to Iowa and 44 points to Nebraska. That's different. So, it's going to be really, really bad if Fickle comes back next year. And he is. But my point is, if he comes back next year in the coach and it looks just this bad again or worse, they probably can't fire him. You're right. But it's going to be difficult. Dave, you can't just cut a $40 million check. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. Dave, to meet you halfway on an old man take, and then we'll go to another caller. I was listening to, again, Zach and Jesse on the camp, and Jesse's written about this at The Athletic as well. Talk about a player like Leon Lowry, right, who transferred, and apparently Wisconsin coaches wanted him to put his hand in the dirt, which is a little silly because that's how he played this year, and they got dominated against the run. And if your answer to stopping the run in the Big Ten is to have a 250-pound backer, which isn't big enough, put his hand in the dirt and play down defensive lineman, you're probably drawing dead against the Iowas of the world anyways, as we've seen. But Leon Lowry basically said, hey, I've been a stand-up guy I don't want to put my hand in the dirt. I'm moving on. And I think that's a little bit of an attitude with college players now. Like, I don't know how many college players are looking to make a position switch or tweak or to do something that they don't want to do because I'll just transfer somewhere that's going to let me play the way I want to play. And I think that's an element of college football now. I'm not going to act like the players have all of a sudden gone soft and they're not coachable because I don't think Wisconsin is providing good coaching. But I think there's a little bit of that, Dave, to give you an old man take of my own. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, Grant, Tony from Texas.
Tony.
Don't really want to talk about don't want to talk about the Badgers too much, but here's my 2 cents I'll throw in there.
Please.
It seems to me like Luke Fickell came in, thought things were going to go a certain way. It didn't go the way he thought things would go, whether it was recruiting or offensive or defensive schemes, maybe relationships, just is not going the way he wanted. And I hope he has a good plan B. I hope things work out.
Well, he's gonna have to find one. And I would agree. By the way, that assessment of Luke Fickell is mine as well. Like, I think he had an idea. I'm going to do this, this, and this, and none of it has worked. And now he's like, I feel kind of up a creek without a paddle. I think that's where he is right now. I agree.
And before I get into the NFL, I heard you need a Marquette, Wisconsin ticket. I will try to help you out.
I don't. So I tweeted earlier today at Wisco Grant. I tweeted, I'd love to go watch Wisconsin versus Marquette on Saturday, but nosebleeds are $150 before peas. I know money is no object for Marquette folks, but as a blue-collar everyman Badgers fan, I'll sadly have to watch at home. It's not like I could probably get a credential. I could probably find a way to get a cheaper ticket. I would rather just bitch about Marquette and start a little bit of a media rivalry going into this game. That's more what it's about. I just kind of wanted to take a pot shot.
Okay. Hey, I know you're a big fan of that Colin Cowherd Middlecoff podcast.
I do.
They really had the last 2 episodes really good. I want to hit the Jets really quick. Aaron Rodgers, I didn't think I would see this quickly, but Aaron has really deteriorated. He looks like one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. Did you watch any of that Jets game?
I did. I thought they'd be like 500, slightly better than 500. I thought they'd be maybe the Commanders, but a little less, like hovering, like 9-8, maybe squeaking into the last final playoff spot and kind of being fun. And they've been anything but fun, and they suck. They've lost 8 of 9, I think now, excluding that Tennessee or that Texans game.
Yeah, one of the worst teams in the league. And some good thing. I like hearing the national narrative sometimes, because sometimes we're too close to the situation.
Yeah.
And when I'm hearing these national guys, and we're getting a lot of love, a lot of praise, talking about the Packers' power game, the scheme, the culture in Green Bay, I'm like, man, this team can do something. I thought they could before the year. But I go back to like 2014. That's the last time we had an offense like that with prime Eddie Lacy.
Yep.
Josh Jacobs is a better version of Eddie Lacy, but no one's going to push us around. I love that. And I think when we get to the playoffs, we can go mano a mano against anyone and beat anyone. And all we have to do is, like you said, get off to a good start and maintain during the game. They have the team to do it this year. You go back to the summer, you and I talked about who we like this year. We both said Green Bay and Detroit.
Yeah.
That's what it's going to end up being. And this game Thursday, I am going to pick the Packers to win this. This is going to be like Ali, Frazier. There's going to be 3 fights. We're going to win this second one. I'm going to mark it down.
So I don't entirely disagree. I don't know that I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I think the Packers are going to win, but I can't wait for this game. I think it's going to be great. Both teams have a full week off. It's not like both teams are playing a Thursday night game on a short week, right? So I like that. It's going to feel a little bit, I think for those two teams, a little bit more traditional than your run-of-the-mill Thursday night game. And I know they were short rest last week on Thanksgiving, but that was a Thanksgiving game, so there's a little extra pomp and circumstance that hopefully helps compensate for the lack of rest throughout the week going into that game. I'm with you. The more I watch this team, and you can go back probably to the Pittsburgh game last year, which is where I really begin my sample size for this version of Packers football. Now, it's not that those games before the Pittsburgh game didn't count. They lost those games. That was a bad stretch of football, but I think it was because they had so many young guys all trying to figure it out at once. When they finally started to get it together, kind of around that Pittsburgh game, kind of really get an idea of who this team is and what they do well and how they operate. And they're a different team when they start fast. It's not that they can't come from behind. They can. They have the horses. They're good enough. It's not like they're this limited, slow, like Pittsburgh Steelers the last couple of years, or, the Wisconsin Badgers when they were elite defense and an offense that could just do enough. Like, they can come from behind. It's not about their personnel. It's about their personality. Wow, Grant, good work with that one. That was excellent. It's not about their personnel. It's about their personality. They execute at a higher level. They play with more confidence. They make fewer mistakes. When they get off to that good start and kind of get the train on the tracks right away at the beginning of the game, they're just a different team. And Tucker Kraft mentioned that in his presser yesterday, kind of in preparation for this Detroit game. We want to get off started right? Kind of maybe relax the crowd a little bit so we can kind of settle in and get to work, was kind of the crux of his comments. This is a different team when they start fast, and they did anything but against Detroit the first time. They just stumbled all over the place in the first quarter. They didn't execute in the red zone, and they just penalties and drops, and then that pick six was awful. I'm really excited about this game. I think both of these teams are excellent, and I'm with you, Tony. I've been saying it for 3 or 4 weeks now. I think this Packers team can beat anybody. Doesn't mean they'll be favored. Doesn't mean that I'd pick them, but they have the capability. Even the Eagles and the Lions. I think that's 100% on the board. 608-321-1670. By the way, I want to talk about Josh Jacobs in the running game. So we're going to take a call here, start to wind down this first segment, then coming back, segment number 2 of the hour. I'm going to cool it on the phone calls for a sec. I have some Josh Jacobs things that I want to share with you. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, Grant. Clemhead Mike.
Hey, Clemhead. How's it going up in Chippewa Falls?
Oh, pretty good. How are you?
Not too bad. Not too bad at all. Good Thanksgiving. I didn't get to see any grandkids or anything like you. I'm sure you had a great time. Probably pretty tired out from being with the family, though, Mike.
Oh, God. We had 17 people over.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
it was fun.
I feel you. It's fun, though. That's what the holidays is all about.
It really was. And no political talk or anything like that. We're all pretty much on the same side.
That's nice.
I was listening and it's not a successful Grant Bill show without Tony from Texas and Dave Monona. I get to follow those guys, so that was cool.
Yeah.
But you mentioned Caryville. I just a quick aside. Caryville, you can tell a city or township gets no respect when they spelt their name wrong on the highway sign.
Yeah.
I used to drive through there all the time. On the way where it turns in from 37 to 85 when it goes to 85, they spelled Caryville wrong on the highway sign. So
they don't take themselves too seriously. That's just the kind of people they are down there in Caryville. Yeah.
Spelled it with 2 R's on the sign.
Right.
I know people probably get mad at me for saying this, but I'm kind of glad the Badgers lost because if they won, they'd probably get invited to some stupid Summer's Eve douche bowl or the Lane Bryant lingerie bowl or something. I didn't want them
and what's so lame about this, even if they were the last team to make a bowl, Clemhead, like let's say they got in on academics, kind of, I think that's what happened with Minnesota last year. There were a couple teams up for a bowl, and it's like, all right, you had great academics, we'll let you in. Even if they got some like participation trophy bowl, the point of that wouldn't be the bowl. It would be the fact that they get, 3 more weeks of practice or whatever it is. Like, it's not even about the bowl for these teams that just get in. It allows you to get, different players in the building or whatever. It's not even about the game itself. It's about the opportunity to have more practice, and it's a functional thing. That's a bummer. I understand that that's nice for the coaches. It's a product of the schedule and the way that college football works now, but it's not even about the game. It's about everything else.
Bowl committees love the Badgers because they travel so well. So you're always thinking, Badgers, no matter, if they got a 500 record, they're going somewhere because committees love the Badgers. They bring in a lot of red shirts in those stadiums.
Yeah.
They really love the Badgers. So as I was afraid that I don't want to be sitting there at 10 o'clock at night on December 21st watching some lame bowl game. I said, I'm kind of glad they're out of it now. I can just relax.
Yeah, and I don't need to watch Braden Locke play again. Clemhead, that's a good call. I appreciate it. Braden Locke in his postgame presser, I saw Carly Marotta tweet this. It's like, well, what are your future plans? Braden Locke's, well, I'd like to be back and I'd like to be a part of this program. And fans are like, that's fine, actually. It's fine. It's fine. Go, Braden, go fight. There's NIL money out there for you. Go seek a better opportunity. This program, obviously, this coaching staff has let you down. And they forgot to tell you in meetings, don't throw the ball at the helmet of the defensive lineman or your offensive lineman. Both were a problem. Let's get the ball up a little bit. All right, I said one more call, but there's one more. Let's do this, and then we'll take a break, and then I want to tell you some Josh Jacobs stats. I have a take for you regarding the running game that Tony mentioned. Wisco Sports Show, who's this?
Hey, it's Darnell.
Hey, Darnell, what's up?
Hey, Grant. So remember when Tyler Wall said he wanted to come back for his 7th year, and everyone was just like, actually, how about you don't? That'd be kind of cool if you didn't.
Yeah, it's cool. And by the way, how much is that freed up? And I don't mean to make this an anti-Tyler Wall thing, but now that you don't have an undersized 4 that can't shoot, like you just look at how much freer the court is for the guys that are left over. And I know Tanji's been great. I'm not going to say it's not addition by subtraction. They've additioned by addition too, but just getting him out of there has made so much freer on the court now, especially on offense and defense.
Now they only have one 6'7" forward that is bringing them down on offense that needs to not see as much time on the court. Right?
One down, one to go, Darnell. You're absolutely right. We're making progress.
No, I mean here's the truth. So this Badger team did not deserve a bowl, even if they would have gotten the pity 5-7 bowl or even a 6-6 bowl. Like it's kind of a moot point, but the Badgers didn't deserve it, and they're not going to get it. And now they have to pay the price of kind of being like one of those subpar Big Ten teams that has a huge prove it year coming next year. Like, has there ever been a hotter seat than the one that Luke Fickle's sitting on going into 2025? Because that is, he's in an absolute prove it year. But I mean, talk about a story. If you're gonna write a story about someone's like career path and everything, and the guy went to the college football playoff with a group of 5 school, and then comes to the Badgers, kind of struggles, and then finds his rhythm and everything. That'd be a hell of a movie. That's all I gotta say.
No, and I hope it gets better. I hope that some of these recruits come in and pop, and there's just a lot more question marks. And look, as a sports fan, what we do going into seasons is we rationalize, we take players and we take things. It's like, well, if this can happen, then this, and all that has to happen then is this guy does that. And like, we draw it up. It's like, if all these things can happen, this team can be great. And I can't connect those dots. I can't even fanboy my way to things being better. I hope they will be. You get the right quarterback, and you get a couple lucky bounces of the ball, you win a game that maybe you shouldn't, but they've been so awful at winning those games. Like, they were in the Oregon game, they were in the Penn State game, they've had opportunities, they were in it against Ohio State last year, and they just can't get that first signature win. They can't really do anything. And then the next week they come back against Nebraska, or next week against Iowa, and they just fall flat. It's just, everything's bad. Everything's bad. Let's talk about Josh Jacobs. We'll get into some Packers talk next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 second.
I think there's only so many things you can do in terms of what they've shown on tape. So you just better be able to pivot from an offensive perspective if they show you something different.
As Matt LaFleur talking about Detroit's injuries, it's like, how do you even prepare for a team missing this many guys? How do you know what to expect? And you don't, right? I think I got a lot of takes about this upcoming Lions game, and I want to keep them in the chamber. I don't want to spend them all the night because we're reacting to what happened against the Dolphins. We're reacting to the Badgers' loss on Friday. And as we get closer to Thursday, we'll talk more about the Lions. I got like 3 or 4 just killer Packers-Lions takes. I watched Elf over the weekend. It's like when Miles Finch comes in. I got 3 or 4 ideas in here that I'm particularly psyched about. I got like 3 or 4 Packers-Lions takes in the clip, and I'm very excited. So as we get closer to Thursday, it's going to be a fun week of Packers talk, which is why I'm excited. I'm glad that you guys wanted to talk a little Badgers today because we can do that today and then lean more into the Packers as the week goes along. Comment on the live stream, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, @WiscoGrant as well. Going to take a break from the phone calls for a couple minutes here. I want to talk about something that Mike Clemens brought up on Bill's show earlier today. He joined in hour number 3, by the way. So you're like, oh, Mike Clemens, I want that content. Hour 3 today, because the practice schedule had to join Bill. Normally is in the final hour, but today, right after noon, about 12:20 for 3 segments. Good. He was aces. His selections of cuts, players, coaches, 10 out of 10. Hit the nail right on the head today. And there was one comment from Josh Jacobs that really jumped out to me because it felt like this comment hinted at something. It got to something that we talked about a couple weeks ago. I love it when we can add to a previous conversation. I love when we have a take and then things happen. And then we take those things and we add them to the take. We evolve, right? We continue to, bark up a similar tree, right? As the weeks pass and as we get more information. A few weeks back, I think it was first asked by a texter or a caller. We talked about the Packers' identity. What's their identity, right? Remember this? And we really couldn't nail it down exactly. And I can't exactly remember when we talked about this, but it was somewhere slightly before or slightly after the Lions game, the first Lions game, right? Which was a messy loss, obviously. So at this moment in time, when we're trying to figure out the Packers' identity, we're talking about losses to Houston or wins over Houston, Jacksonville, Chicago slightly after, a loss to Detroit. So it was a stretch. They were like 3-1 or 4-1 or something like that when we're talking about the Packers' identity. They'd won plenty of games, but I think they were a little bit all over the place. We're trying to really figure out what this team is. And Jordan Love was in and out of the lineup, too. He left the game against Jacksonville, came back the next week, was a little limited, and then had to play himself back. And the Packers were winning, but it kind of felt like we were in the wilderness a little bit. One week, Christian Watson would make a nice play, and then he'd disappear for 2 weeks. And then, Jaden Reed would be great. And what happened to Jaden Reed? Tucker Kraft would be super productive. It's like they haven't really done much with Tucker Kraft the last 2 weeks. And part of that is by design. That's the type of offense they have. But my point is, right aside from personnel, we couldn't really get our arms around, okay, this is what they're good at. This is what they could build the plane around to potentially maybe get hot and go on a run later on in the year. And at the time, when we talked about this, when we talked about the identity of this team, I said, I think they're a running team led by Josh Jacobs and Matt LaFleur's scheme. I think that's the tip of the spear. That's the identity, and everything else builds off of that. It's not to say they don't have a good passing game. They do. It's not to say that wide receivers, tight ends, Jordan Love, they're all important. They have excellent players there. I think the identity of this team, this was a month or so ago, is Josh Jacobs and their running game. Because if they can run the ball effectively, they can stay ahead of the sticks. They can stay on schedule, which is really important for this team. And I think part of that is they're a young team. So avoiding longer downs and distances, sticking to the script is really important for a younger team. But I also think Jordan Love's a rhythm player, the way that he plays and the way that he progresses through a game. If he's not in rhythm, it can be a little clunky. And one bad throw can negate, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or more good ones, which is difficult because he'll put the ball in harm's way. So handing the ball to Josh Jacobs, staying ahead of the sticks, and also limiting the number of attempts that Jordan Love has to make. I don't think the Packers want Jordan Love throwing 40 times. If they can have him throwing 25 times, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little less, depending on the game. I think that's the sweet spot. I think it's a big part of the reason they went and got Josh Jacobs. It's like, we cannot be in a situation this year where we're without running backs that we can trust and that we can ride, because then that's going to put too much on the plate of Jordan Love, and we don't like that. Separate conversation about, a guy that you just paid a bunch of money, but it's not the conversation we're having here. The identity is Josh Jacobs and the running game and the scheme and all of the things that Matt LaFleur has kind of cooked up behind Josh Jacobs to make that thing cook. And I think since we arrived on that conclusion, we talked about the identity being the running game. I think that's proven to be the case, right? Especially what you saw what Josh Jacobs has done the last couple of weeks. Like, that's their identity. It's funny. Mike Clemens includes in an email to me and Bill, and he played this earlier on Bill's show, Josh Jacobs, and the cut is labeled, Josh Jacobs felt like there was a target on his back versus Dolphins defense, brought safeties in just to stop him. And I'll play you this cut. It's about 30 seconds long. This is Josh Jacobs, I think, hinting at the fact that he had like 20 carries for 40-something yards. He wasn't particularly effective if you took out the passing numbers. Yeah, all of his big plays were on passing plays, but his rushing, not super effective. And this is kind of him talking about that.
I feel like for the defense, like I was the focal point, really. So they was kind of like almost giving up some plays to really stop me. And like they was bringing their safeties down and basically to stop the run. So anything that we was doing outside or quick game, quick throws outside, it was wide open. That just lets you know that we got so many weapons on this team, man. We so deep at every position. At any given play, man, it could be something special. We all do the right thing. So it's been fun, man. It's fun playing for a team like that.
I was the focal point, he says. They designed their defense to stop me. They left themselves vulnerable in other areas to stop me. And when I heard that cut, I messaged Bill and I made a little note. I said, that's how you know that Josh Jacobs is the identity of this team. That's how you know. What is the other team building their game plan to stop? What is the other team in meetings all week saying, how do we stop this? How do we take away this? We can live with the other stuff. We'll figure out everything else. How do we stop that one thing? And Josh Jacobs, he came out, he all but said it. He's like, I felt like I was the focal point. And in fact, I think that's exactly what he said. That's the direct quote, right?
I feel like for the defense, like I was the focal point, really. So
there you go. That's how you know that's their identity. They're a Josh Jacobs, Matt LaFleur running game led team. And I'm interested to see how this is going to play against Detroit on Thursday. Detroit's missing a lot of defensive players. So I think there's a path. If you're a Packers fan and you're trying to cook up a recipe, you're trying to cook up a path for the Packers to go on the road and win this game, I think it starts with, well, they're banged up on defense. You can take advantage of that. Okay. Well, I thought they had a path to victory at home last time because it was raining. Jared Goff in the rain. You can get to him. You can make him make mistakes. You can make him uncomfortable in the rain. The problem is the Packers didn't hold up their end of the bargain. Packers had 10 penalties. I think they went 1 for 4 in the red zone on touchdown opportunities. Jordan Love had that pick 6. Like, they didn't force Detroit to make plays in the elements. They made a couple, like 2 or 3, and they were all in the first half. Like, they could go into cruise control after that Jordan Love pick 6. It felt over at that point, right? Jordan Love. Jared Goff made a throw or 2 in the first half, but that's all they asked him to make. I'm talking about make Jared Goff play 4 straight quarters of perfect football, effective football in the rain. And maybe he would have anyways, but the Packers didn't make him. And it's the same thing on Thursday. Like, make those injuries matter. You have to come in and play a type of football game, a quality of football game that forces those absences to be felt, right? You want to play the type of game where Detroit Lions fans are saying, man, if only we had this guy, if only he was out there, man, we're really feeling the loss of this guy. But if Jordan Love throws for 2 picks and they commit a bunch of penalties and they're stepping, well, okay, well, then the injuries aren't going to matter. And you're going to let the Lions get away with that, right? So, I think Josh Jacobs is a big part of that. How can you run the ball? Also, side note, I haven't heard one person mention this around the entire NFL. The injuries to the Lions defense is one of the biggest stories going in sports right now, especially with the way that the Packers and the Vikings are kind of breathing down the neck in the division. And I think the Lions are going to win it because they're awesome and I think they're well coached. And just the whole thing is, I don't even think a lot of injuries is going to topple that thing. I think they're still going to win the division. But a lot of people are talking about it. How many injuries? Oh my God, how many players are on IR? I haven't heard one person say, you know what? It's probably because they play on a parking lot. It's probably because they play on a concrete surface that's covered with carpet. That surface is nasty. Play 8 or 9 games a year on that, especially for the type of physical team they are. Yeah, no wonder guys are going down. And I just haven't heard anyone point that out. It's like, yeah, maybe Detroit in the offseason should look at fixing that a little bit, helping their players out, because that surface is gnarly. It's not a surprise at all that guys are getting banged up. And it sucks for the Lions because it's the best season they're having. And I don't know the histories. I'm not a historian, but certainly the best season so far of my lifetime, probably in a long, long time, maybe ever. I don't know. And I just haven't heard anyone point that out. Like, normally Peter Schrager, Kyle Brandt, somebody like that is all over this. It's like, well, actually, a lot of people don't know that the Lions playing field blows. And I haven't heard anyone mention that. It's just interesting. That's all. I like interesting things. Sue me. Let's take a 5-minute break if you have any thoughts. 608-321-1670. Monday mailbag at 5:50. Get your questions in, sports related or otherwise. In fact, I think it works better for the show if they're not sports related, but you do you. GrantBills21@gmail.com. Send me your questions.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
It's the Wisco Sports Show, Monday mailbag in 10 minutes. So submit your questions, grantbills21@gmail.com. Any Packers or Badgers thoughts, get them in the next 10 minutes. I can take your call, 608-321-1670. Shout out to one of our presenting sponsors on WAYY up in Eau Claire, Kai's Chevy Town on the north side of Menominee. BYC Kai's for the best buys, as they say. And now through the end of the year, their Reg Tag event is going on. So they're offering big rebates and savings and specials of all types on new vehicles or leases. And if you're not in the market for a new car right now, but you need service done, and of course, everyone needs to service their car because you want to keep that thing running, especially as the weather gets colder, whether it's tires or oil changes or whatever, they're offering savings on that as well. So if you don't need a new car, you can still take advantage of that end of year event, Kai Chevy Town. And speaking of WAYY and Sports Talk 105.1, our affiliate in Eau Claire, I have nothing concrete to offer you at this time, but just something to mark down if you're listening in Eau Claire, Chippewa Falls, Menominee, or in Falls City, as Fred was. It's like Falls City. Everyone's heard of Falls City. I'm hoping with Christmas falling on a Wednesday this year, I would like to go up and be with my folks for Christmas. They live in the Menominee area. And I'd like to not have to come back down to work on Thursday the 26th and Friday the 27th. But I don't want to not do shows those days. So I'm looking at maybe doing some remote shows at bars or at places around Eau Claire. So if you're up in that area, just bookmark the Thursday and Friday after Christmas as potential spots. Maybe get to do a little bit of what Ebo always gets to do down here around Madison, the tailgates at the Red Zone. It's not going to be like Badger Tailgate. Let's get hundreds of people to Badger Band. I can't promise anything like that, but I can promise a good time and a live show somewhere around the WAYY Sports Talk 105 listenership area. So just mark that down the couple days after Christmas if that's something you'd be interested coming out for a live show. I will tell you details as I get details, just something that I started working on earlier today because it sounds fun. And I'm up there for the week anyways. I might as well do some shows because I don't want to just run a best of the entire week. That would be lame. Although I don't feel bad about taking time off. That seems a little much to take basically the full week off as there's things going on. The end of the NFL season and Bulls season and stuff like that. A Packers thought, something to chew on as we get closer to Wednesday. Are we turning the corner with Quay Walker? And maybe, I don't want to say more importantly, but along similar lines, Lucas Van Ness, who's made a couple plays the last 2 weeks. He made that strip sack against the Niners, and it was like the one play he made all game in like 20 snaps. But I came in on Monday and said, that's the type of thing that could get a player going. He's got all the physical ability. He's got all the, he just needs something to kickstart his heart. Like Motley Crue said. He probably likes Motley Crue. Look at him. Seems like the kind of guy. He's going to the bar. He's listening to Motley Crue and AC/DC. Him and Tucker Kraft both. Let's be real. He's drawing conclusions on his appearance. Lucas Van Ness might be starting to go. This is, by the way, this is Quay Walker. And Mike just brought it on Bill's show earlier today. I marked down some of these pieces of audio. I'm like, I want to play these tonight, 4 to 6. So this is Quay Walker talking about how sometimes he can be an overthinker, which is what I said the last couple of weeks when he's playing poorly. I was like, guys, I think he's just in his head. He's a little hesitant. He's overthinking. He's better than this. This is a mental block. This is Quay Walker talking about how, yeah, I can overthink. Sometimes I'm my own worst enemy.
Just being more calm, man. Just having better awareness, pre-snap, stuff like that. Whenever I just be calm instead of just trying to think. Like I said, I'm an overthinker. I just think too much. So that's it, man. Just give myself a break too. You know what I'm saying? Give myself a little grace. We'll go from there. Like I said, I don't want to do too much because I've played better the past 2 weeks. Just want to stay humble and just see where I can go from here. That's all.
So first of all, I mean, come on. Just sounds like the most likable guy in the world. Got a good head on his shoulders. And a good perspective about things. I also think Jeff Hafley, as the season goes along, and this isn't surprising. He's a new defensive coordinator who's installed a different scheme, and we knew that would be the case. but he's getting to learn these guys better. He's getting more of a sample size watching these players playing. Okay, I get a little bit better idea of what works and what doesn't, how I can use this guy and how I can't use this guy. It's like a baseball manager learning his bullpen over the course of the year, right? I always used to talk about this with Counsell. Like towards the end of the year, he would really get that thing dialed. And he got it dialed with the Cubs last year. As much as we dragged the Cubs and their crummy relief staff, towards the end of the year, he got it together. Figured out when I can use this guy and when I can use that guy. They didn't have enough good players because the Cubs blow at player development and their front office stinks. But like Counsell did his job, I think, towards the end of the year. Just a supernatural funk at the beginning of the year that took him way too long to pull out of. It's the same with football. Jeff Hafley just got here. He didn't do weeks and weeks of study on Quay Walker before the draft. He hasn't coached Quay Walker for 3 years. He's been here for this year. So figuring out how to use Quay Walker combined with, I think Quay Walker just got in a mental rut for a couple of weeks. He's coming out of that. Now, how good he can be, how high his ceiling can get, that's another thing. But I think he's raised his floor and he's pulled out a little bit of a mental rut. I think just running around and not thinking. This is what I talked about. Jeff Hafley got to Green Bay. He's like, I don't want guys thinking. I don't want guys bogged down. Here's Matt LaFleur talking about both Quay Walker and Lucas Van Ness and some of the plays that they've been making. And I again, this is along similar lines. We've been dialed on the show. We've been right about all this stuff.
I think a lot of us, especially in the coaching world, can be our own toughest critics. So you love that about Quay, and he wants to be perfect, but he's got to realize that this is an imperfect game, and sometimes you got to let it go. If you make a mistake, hopefully it's a learning lesson, and you just move on and go play the next play. He's still a young player. This is his second system, so I would expect that he's going to continue to improve and get better and better and better.
Van Ness is kind of in the same boat, the back-to-back games with sacks, and he talks about the confidence to act on his instinct. I mean, are these players like, they're in an assignment, but they have to sort of break that if they see an opportunity?
Yeah, I think so. You got to have a little effort in you, if you know what I mean. That's a good thing. Like you want guys that are conscientious and want to do it the right way, but you never want robots out there. These guys got to go cut it loose and trust what they see. And that's why the training is so important. So you have the confidence to go out there and do it and try to go play fast and be very decisive, because I think when you're indecisive, usually you're ineffective.
I agree. I would rather miss a play going balls to the walls to make it rather than just standing stuck in the middle. And I think that's what we saw with Quay Walker. All right, I got 2 minutes. Literally, I have 2 minutes to take one more call. So be quick. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Ridge Runner Mark, how are we doing?
Ridge Runner Mark, I'm swell. How are you?
Excellent. I'm good. Hey, real quick on Quay Walker, two things. Wonder if the mental block, part of that mental challenge was the fact that he suffered a concussion. And yeah, he passed all the protocols, otherwise he wouldn't be on the field. But maybe there's some of that lingering, like, oh, what do I do? And now he's starting to get out of it. And,
processing.
Or maybe it was a wake-up call.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was a wake-up call for him even.
Yeah, sure.
The other thing is, I wonder, Quay Walker, if we have the challenge of, hey, he's supposed to be TJ Watt, or he's supposed to be this player, which means he's supposed to do this, he's supposed to do this. We haven't let him figure out what he's good at. And maybe he's just a tackling machine, and every now and then he's going to do a big play for you, as opposed to the big splash plays we expect from someone like, the big name guys that are doing all the things. And we got to let him kind of figure out who he is and what he's going to excel at.
So I think part of that, and people have talked about, well, he shouldn't be the Mike. He should be, different. I'm not a football coach. I don't understand all that stuff. Thank you, Richard.
We spend a lot of time in the dark. It doesn't make us weird.
I just bumped a button. Where's the Ted Thompson audio in the studio? What did I just hit? Oh, Ted. This is Evo's audio over here. Holy balls, that scared me.
We spend a lot of time in the dark. It doesn't make us weird.
That scared the daylights out of me. One more thing on Quay Walker. I don't think it's a surprise at all that that his best game of the season takes place on the same night where Isaiah McDuffie is also awesome. I think in football, especially defensively, these guys are connected a lot more than you think. Like Evan Williams goes down and, it's interesting. Xavier McKinney looks like he's a step behind a lot of these players, right? Kingsley and Igbari starts getting loose and Rashawn Gary starts to play a little bit better. So does Kenny Clark. Like the success of one guy directly affects another. So it's not a surprise to me at all that Quay Walker played great. Oh, well, guess who was getting interviewed on NBC? It was Isaiah McDuffie, who played probably the best game or one of the best games of his career. All these things are connected. All right, let's get to the Monday mailbag. Final thoughts to get your, or final couple of moments to get your emails in. GrantBills21@gmail.com. We'll wrap up the show next.
We spend a lot of time in the dark. It doesn't make us weird.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Because the mail never stops.
Charles, we'll be writing to you.
Ah, She's Got Mail. That's the name of the book.
That's it, honey. There's never a let up. It's relentless. Every day it piles up more and more and more. And you gotta get it up. And the more you get out, the more it keeps coming in.
The Monday mailbag. Little nonsense, little fun, little break from the sports talk. I mean, it doesn't have to be a break from the sports talk. You can send emails about whatever you want. I think it's funnier if most of the questions at least aren't about sports, but that doesn't mean none of them can be about sports. GrantBills21@gmail.com is the email. Grant, why do you force us to email you when we're already texting and commenting on live stream? Because if I let them come from anywhere, there'd be too many. And this, I force you to jump through one hoop, and now they're all organized in the same place. So you at least have to have something specific to ask, whereas on the live stream, you can just fart noise and hit enter. Michael, who is a routine question asker, I appreciate him. Have you started Christmas shopping yet? I sure haven't. Okay. All right. I tend to shop last second because I don't know what to get some people, especially those that already have everything they want. I usually resort to gift cards for my favorite restaurants or retail stores and Omaha Steaks. Michael, that's not really a question. Have I started Christmas shopping yet? A couple things. Probably this weekend, although Bill's Christmas party is this weekend, so maybe not. Short answer, yes. Long answer, very little, but I kind of have a concept. I have a concept of a plan, Michael. I usually resort to gift cards for favorite restaurants or retail stores and Omaha steaks. I want to get my sister just a huge thing of Omaha steaks. Grant, where do I put all this? I don't know. Grace, Merry Christmas. Figure it out. Her name is Grace. Whoops. Sorry. Normally I'm careful about that. This is from Tony. Tony in Texas specifically. Says, Grant, how do you feel about the Vanderpump Rules cast shakeup? Will you continue to watch the show? This is an excellent question. This is the reason for this segment, is questions like this. It could kill the show. We're all aware of that, right? Like, Vanderpump could die with a new cast. And if it does, then it was probably time. There's also a chance that it could rule. But I'm not going to sit around and bemoan what was. It was played out, Tony. Like, everything was Scandival. It was like everything related to Scandival, and I just felt like I felt like that was played out. And it was incredible drama. Like, it kicked so much ass. But then it's like we're 2 full seasons down the road, and Ariana's like still, and I hate to you get cheated on. I hate to make it your fault, but it's like, girl, people get cheated on. Now, most people aren't on reality TV, which makes it worse, but also, like, at least the cheating made for great drama. Plus, the whole world rallied around her. And again, like, I wouldn't want to be her, but it just got to the point with Ariana where it's like, are you? And others on the cast were feeling it. This is not just me. I just feel like Tom and Katie had played out. Oh, you're opening another restaurant. Like, James Kennedy. I was always a James Kennedy guy, but then it's like, oh, you're domesticated now. And his girlfriend was lovely. What was her name again? I can't remember it. And they had the dog. It's like, okay, this is great. And I'm happy for him because he was drinking less. He was healthier, but also like, okay, well then let's get a new character in here who's kind of a mess. Bring Jax back. I saw him and his wife, whose name escapes me, got divorced. Bring Jax back. So that long answer, I know, but that's what the segment is for. It could kill the show, but if it kills the show, that means the show is ready to die. I don't think we needed another season of all of that. I don't think it was necessary. So I'm down. Let's roll the dice. It's like Damian Lillard. You know what it is, Tony? It's exactly like the Damian Lillard trade. Could bring back Drew Holiday, but I kind of feel like we've seen that movie before. Let's roll the dice. Maybe it'll rule. And if it doesn't, well, at least we tried. That's actually a perfect, wow, good job, Grant. Thank you, everyone. I know. That's why I make the medium, the small to medium bucks. Bennett emails, our last one. What is your favorite year of Wisconsin sports all time? This is a complicated question. Because you could pick 2010 Packers Super Bowl. You could pick 2018. This is the thing. Like, it's hard to make it Brewers centric because the Brewers never win anything. You can make it 2018 because that season for the Brewers was very special. I am inclined, I believe, to say 2021. But Bennett, the reasoning is it doesn't hint at the spirit of your question. The reason I love 2021 so much was because the year 2021 kicked so much ass. We were coming out of the pandemic. The sun was warmer. The music sounded better. And the Bucks won a title, which ripped so hard. That was awesome. But also, the 2021 Brewers were a blast and a half. Now, they got blasted in the playoffs, but you could say that of every team they've ever existed. So but they lost to the Braves. Yeah, but the Bucks won the title, and 2021 was great because we could go out and see people again and do things again. And the Packers lost in the NFC Championship, or felt like they lost in the NFC Championship game. I guess they did in early 2021, they did, but then in late 2021, right? Do I have that correctly? I believe. Yeah. 2021, they lost to Brady, and then later that year, they lost to the Niners. By that time, it was 2022. And then, 2023, that's when they lost. It's always a year behind. So I'll say 2021, Bennett, but I don't think that's getting at the crux of your question. And for that, I apologize, but it's my show. So I guess I'll answer the question how I see fit. So thank you for your emails. The Vanderpump question, Tony, that was an excellent one. I think it's the Drew Holiday trade all over again. It might not work, but if it doesn't work, then it was time anyways. I think it's a really good corollary for what we're dealing with on Vanderpump Rules. I'll watch it. Screw it. I'll throw it on. I'm behind on Survivor, by the way. I didn't watch last Wednesday, so I got to catch up. Speaking of reality TV, maybe I'll do that tonight with a Monday night game. The Browns. Okay, God. Browns. Although Bo Nix and the Broncos are fun. I'm excited to watch them in a standalone game. I feel like all football fans should do that. They've been good. We should recognize that. And, of course, America's Booth. Tomorrow, Mike Clemens. We'll talk more Packers as we get closer to Detroit. Pretty Badgers heavy today, so if that's not your bag, I'm